Welcome to the Create What You Speak podcast. My name is Sloane Freemont, and I'm your host. Today, it's our monthly conversation with Dr. Erhard Vogel. And we've been doing these conversations now probably 5 or 6 months. And every month, it seems like we're building on the previous conversation, and our conversations are so expansive and so open and so freeing after each one. And so I'll just briefly touch on Erhard's background. If you're not familiar, if this is your first time listening to our conversation, just to give you a little understanding of who Dr. Erhard Vogel is, and then we'll get into this month's conversation. So Erhard is recognized as one of the foremost meditation and self-realization teachers in the world. He's traveled all over the world, Europe, the Middle East, Afghanistan, India, Nepal, and China, and really researching the way people in different cultures seek fulfillment. And he's taught amongst the Himalayan sages. And after his experience traveling the world, Erhard returned home to address the problems and all the different things that we face in society today. Erhard's teachings are a unique combination of time-tested wisdom and pragmatic method. And he teaches not from books or from other people's ideas, but from his own profound life experience. And I think you can really tell that in our conversations that we have. And his most recent book is called A Dialogue with Death, The Teacher of Life, an Ancient Story for the Modern World. So Erhard, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Sloane.
So today I want to talk about resistance. You had a recent one of your pearls of wisdom. And if you're not familiar, Erhard sends out pearls of wisdom every week. And there was one from back April 12th. And it was very simple, as they always are. You do not have resistances, you create them.
Yeah. Yes.
You do not have, and have is in italics, resistances is capital. You create them, and create is in italics. So I wanted to talk about resistance today. I know that's something that I think everybody can relate to. And it's something that, again, the way you write it is very simple and profound, but there's so much in each word that's in the sentence. So that's where I'd like to take us today to start with.
Okay, so how about if we start out with what we mean resistance in this particular case, and the kind of talking and teaching that we have here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It occurs to me that I feel, and I've always felt this, that whatever I am teaching, I'm just bringing out what happens in most of us throughout life. In other words, the ideas and thoughts and so on that I bring up that are hopefully considered helpful and wise happen within us. We just don't always listen, or we listen and then dismiss. Mm-hmm. So I'm talking about ideas that would make our life more successful, more enjoyable, more rich and full and textured and luscious and beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. The way we experience life within ourselves, so it is illuminating and fulfilling and happy and joyous, right?
Right.
So we have ideas in life about that. And the ideas are, okay, here is such and such. If I were to become more attentive to what's going on in my thoughts and my minds and so on, I could just much more take charge and direct it towards how I would be satisfied, right?
Right.
But then we get these inspirations. We even make New Year's determinations and so on, but determinations hopefully throughout the year, not just once a year, and then don't carry them out. So things go on the same way. Mm-hmm. And for most people, I think most people would agree that things could be better.
Right. Right.
They could be more satisfying. They could be more successful or more joyous or what have you. Well, the world around you is not going to get together and say, okay, for Sloane or for Erhard, I'm going to make it go better now.
Right.
No, it's not.
Right.
It's up to us to do that.
Right.
And so if we have recognitions through inspirations That's wonderful. It's a great gift every time. And its inspirations are very invigorating, enlivening, and so on.
Hmm.
But then they need to be carried out. And
Right.
that's where the ball is usually dropped. Why? The answer is resistance. How could you resist being less suffering and more joyous? How
Right.
could you resist being more successful? How could you resist being more loved and loving more? Right? Well, because of what you learned way back and carried on throughout life.
Hmm.
In very early in life, we're taught certain things about ourselves that are usually very limiting.
Yes.
Here's what I mean. Okay, ask yourself, did I grow up being told by the world around me that I am wonderful, that I am a creative, joyous person who is free of limitations and who is utterly worthy to be experienced, to be listened to be felt throughout life? How many of you were growing up that way?
Definitely not
Nobody,
me. No.
right?
Mm-mm.
I wasn't.
No.
I was growing up as let's bomb the hell out of him and see if we can kill him, right? And but I mean, so that's different. But not very many people were going up to think of themselves in even worthy of attentiveness.
Right.
So worthy of it. Here is already a key issue. Because if you're not going to be attentive to yourself, you're not going to be experiencing yourself in your life because you're not paying attention to yourself.
Right.
Well, that is very lonely. That is very empty. Don't people suffer from emptiness and loneliness and so on? Right?
Oh,
A
for
lot of
sure. Yeah. And we touched on that last month in our conversation.
Yeah. Well, it's inevitable, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So resistance. Well, because you were trained in a certain way, you were conditioned. And conditioning is like I liken it our internal matrix of our character, our person, who we are, and so on. When we come into this world, is like imagine a ball of clay,
Hmm.
and it's like it's got a few impressions on that we come into this life with, but most of all, it's sort of smooth and kind of virgin in a way.
Hmm.
And so whenever we have an experience, it makes an impression, right? That's how it goes
Right.
neurologically. Every experience, be it from the outside or even experiences how we think and feel and suffer and so on, or joy, it makes an impression. So impressions have the latent energy to repeat the behaviors that made the impression. Does that make sense? In
Yes.
other words, that's how habits are formed. You do
Yes.
something often enough, it becomes a habit. You do that often enough, it becomes a character.
Yes. And especially when you're young and these impressions are happening and you don't even often as an adult it feels like these habits or these things that we do we don't know where they can come from or we don't know we don't know they just happen, right? It's like
Right,
they take you this is how it's always felt to me, like the emotion or whatever the feeling is will take me and has control of me rather than me having control of myself.
right. And that can go all the way into adulthood and even being 50, 60, 70 years old without the person recognizing this is how it happened and
Right.
this is what's running my life,
Right.
right? So we're enslaved and disempowered by that.
Yes.
Now, ask yourself, anyone, listener, has this happened to me?
Hmm.
If you come up with some kind of confusing answer, you're not facing the question because
Hmm.
it's obvious that it has happened to you.
Right.
It's happened to all of us.
Right.
So now, so those habits in childhood, if they weren't like you are worthy and empowered and limitless and so on, they were false. They were negative because
Right.
fundamentally you are all of those things. You are worthy. You are a great power.
Right.
Whether you're in touch with it or not, you are that, you know?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so the impressions are negative,
Right.
and they will inspire more negative behaviors that, yeah, it's because I can't be that successful because I'm not strong enough. Or I'm too limited. I'm too flawed, and so on and so on.
Yes. Yes.
And
We
so
all
that
have the
mm,
we all have the excuses of why we tell ourselves we can't do the things that we want to do.
and then we make those excuses come true.
Exactly.
You see?
I do. I
And
know. I know all
so,
about this.
so that's where the next part comes in, for where I said we repeat something enough, we make a habit. We
Mm-hmm.
do a habit long enough, we form a character. We
Yeah.
form a character strong enough, we form our destiny.
Yeah.
Not destiny sometime in the future, in day-to-day life.
Yes. Yes. It's
I'm
who we are.
disempowered. I can only expect this much of myself. I'm not that creative. I'm not that smart. I'm not that strong. I'm not this and that and that.
Yeah.
So then you resist inner talk that shows you otherwise. You resist your inspirations that say,
Yeah.
wow, you can really do this. Oh, no, I
Yes.
can't. But the resistances aren't so obvious that you can hear them and so on unless you start to tune into yourself.
Mm-hmm.
They just block your attempts to rise above the limitations that they have created. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think one of the interesting parts of this too is you mentioned a couple of times about experiencing yourself. And I know we've talked about this in other episodes about experiencing ourselves. And I think even thinking about that, like if the listeners think today, how am I experiencing myself? That's something that's, I think, also not paid attention to that much, because it that if we if we're if we're looking outside of ourselves, if we're not in tune with what's within and what's happening, the emotions, what we're feeling, we're not, as we've talked about before, we're out here, right? We're out of the body, right? We're not in the body, feeling and thinking in the body, and experiencing ourselves in this way where we're outside of ourselves is that out of touch, that aloneness, that emptiness, right? That we're feeling
Yes.
when we're not experiencing ourselves. So I think for the listeners to even start to understand what experiencing yourself means for you, what does that mean for you, right? If we
Yeah.
and understanding that, getting an understanding of that, if you to me, that has helped me start to see some of these places that I was blind to, that I'd been resisting, or some of these negative voices that start where they feel so automatic to me that I don't even notice it's there until the
Right.
the
Right.
feeling or the behavior is there, right? Understanding how you experience yourself, to me, was what helped me start to see some of the things that we're talking about here today.
So, in very short, when you're not aware of yourself, not in the habit of relating to yourself, of course you don't experience that you're not doing that.
Right.
That's very much a part of the nature of the situation. Right? The fact that we need to ask a question, how do I experience myself, is already a proof that we're not in the
Right.
experience of ourselves.
Right.
But experience ourselves is so fundamental. I often pose the opposite in order to understand something.
Okay.
Imagine the ultimate not experience of yourself would be like being in a coma.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, imagine you're in a coma, but you have maybe 95% of you coma, and 5% is just there enough to be aware that I'm in a coma,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
that I'm not aware of anything else, that I cannot really participate in life and so on because I'm in a coma. How would you feel about being in a coma? Not participating in life, not being able to feel or experience anything.
Yeah. To me, it would feel terrible, and I would want to not be in a coma anymore. I would want to be living life.
Right, okay. But when you're not aware of yourself, you're not aware what's going on within yourself, you're not aware of what you're living, what you're
Right.
experiencing. It's
Right.
like being in a coma.
Yes.
And there isn't even the 5% that recognizes that I'm not experiencing myself.
Right.
I used this example once, 2 or 3 sessions, podcasts before, about the lady who said to me, "Oh, I know what you're talking about because on my way to class, I saw myself sitting in front of a red light." And I said, "How did I get here?"
Right.
Because
Yes.
the mind, the awareness was gone while she was driving to come to a class to be conscious,
Right. And
you
that's
know?
something everybody's done, right? Everybody's had that experience.
But so you have degrees of awareness. So you can have enough degree of awareness to drive a car to a certain destination.
Right.
You could have more of awareness to be aware of, oh, these are the things that I see, these are the colors and the textures and so on, or how my body feels sitting in the seat and so on. But there is still not awareness that I am right now, that I'm being. And it's not just in the body, it's in the whole consciousness, the awareness of yourself, the
Right.
feeling of yourself, the relating to yourself. Most people don't have a relationship with themselves, which means that the mind, feelings, and emotions are doing their work, but not relating it to you.
Right.
They're just doing it to themselves, you know?
Right. Right. And so, and back to resistance for today's topic. So thinking about that and that operating in that comatose state, let's say, because that is how a lot of people operate.
Uh-huh.
When you're in that state and you have so little awareness of yourself and all these disjointed parts, that's how it feels to me, that they're very disjointed. They might be working, but they're not working together in any way that's beneficial. We experience life in this way that resistance almost feels like it would be so like living life that way. Resistance would feel natural because that's almost all you know how to feel,
That's
if
right.
that makes
That's
sense.
very good. I agree. It's automatic, right?
Yeah.
It's unthought of. It's not
Yeah.
done by you anymore. But you're doing it. It's your
Right.
instrument for doing it. You're allowing it. So it helps to take responsibility
Yes.
because nobody else is in charge of your life but
Right.
you.
Right.
Not
Right.
circumstances and conditions, and not even conditioning. They can be influences, but you can also, I say to myself always, I'm an adult. you know, yeah, I've had conditioning, but now as an adult, I can make a choice and
Right.
I can make intelligent choices. So I
Right.
have to inform myself,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
but when I hear this, I'm sure there are people who say, yeah, I understand. This is what's happening inside of me. I know that. What do I do now? Well, first of all, you have to consider yourself worthy of the attention that it takes to do something about it.
Right.
And
Right.
okay, what do I do? Well, if you don't know, what do you do about something you don't know? You Google it. Google it. No, you find
Right.
out.
You start learning, right? You teach yourself, right? And it's like you said, though, nobody's going to come in and tap you on the shoulder and say, today's the day you learn about this, right? These are self-driven things because you want to start doing something about the things that we're talking about. You want to do something about these feelings, this living in these terrible states, right? That's why we do the show, to give the listeners ideas of places to start, of places to go. But the bottom line is the action comes from you.
Right. So, okay. So where do you go? Well, do you go to somebody who is in the same state as you are, or
No,
somebody who knows more? You see,
right,
I would suggest somebody who knows, who's walked the walk, who's lived the life, would be a better idea.
right.
Okay?
Because there's nothing worse also than for someone to go to someone who's in the same scenario as them, because that's going to keep you swirling in that misery of wherever you are, right? Because you're in the same boat and neither of you know how
Very
to get
good.
out of it, or you wouldn't
Very
be in
good.
the boat.
They often know more how to talk about it and sound
Right,
convincing about it. But if they're still in the same boat, they're not going to help you. They're
right,
going to only help you rationalize and lie to yourself more about it, you know,
right.
and
And
that can be very harmful
yes,
because then you're wasting all that good energy because there has to be something in us that inspires us to do something about it now. Yes, I am worthy. Well, then go
right,
for somebody who treats you and relates to you as worthy and has done so with her or himself and and helps you to see the ways through your own experience, not theories and talking and stuff, but through your own experience. You can be helped through experiences. Somebody can guide you through experiences to become aware of yourself, then to
right,
find the volition to find yourself worthy of doing the attentiveness, the work, the getting yourself to focus and getting yourself to live and function, act according to you, not your resistances.
right,
Because your resistances in their nature resist change.
right,
That's what they're all about, is to
right,
keep the negative conditioning getting stronger and stronger through repetition.
right.
That's how that whole system perpetuates, saves itself, keeps itself going, owns you, you
Yes. And
know?
it's when you've had that going for a long time, that's going to be very strong, right? And so when you start to
Well,
make changes and shift to another way, you're going to feel the resistance come in again, right? It's going to come in even stronger. And the thing
right,
that I found with this, when I've done this work and started to value myself enough to do this work, what I found is that when I kept at it, when I just kept doing it, and I came to a decision that I'm not going to live whatever the way was anymore. And I just kept choosing. Sometimes it was 1,000 times a day, right? But I kept choosing myself. I kept choosing that I was worthy of living differently, living happier,
uh-huh,
whatever the emotion was.
mhm,
I just kept choosing the way that I wanted to go. I didn't keep getting pulled down in that resistance that was so easy to fall back into.
right. And that is fundamental. What we're just talking about is fundamental, is that you need to take charge and choose, okay?
Yes.
Um, how do you choose? Because a lot of people don't even know what to choose, you know? One of the rules, I have very few rules, but this is almost like a theorem, is like take what the resistance urges you to do. That's easy to notice because it's talking inside of you. Okay,
Right.
right now I just don't really feel like doing such and such.
Right.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
then I apply the 180-degree rule. That is, I'll do what I don't, the such and such, opposite of the such and such that the resistance wants me to do. I do the opposite with by choice and with repetition till I so strongly establish that the resistance is overpowered. It's gone.
Yeah.
It's wiped out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then the matrix of that clay ball has
Mhm.
that impression of the positive choice now and have
Right.
you repeat the positive, you know. But it requires a lot of understanding of yourself, a lot of
Mhm.
knowledge of yourself, and so to make it easier. And that's where the guidance of someone who knows and whom you can trust helps
Right.
a lot. I mean, it's like instead of it taking 9,000 years, it could take 9 weeks, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so the choice of someone you can trust is very important because do you know what are the most successful help programs in our culture or maybe in humanity? Is the ones that say to you that they're going to help you overcome the resistances with behaviors of the resistances. Do you understand?
With
They say they find something good to say about the resistances,
oh,
and let's
okay,
do that because that's what we feel like doing.
right.
And that's it's successful in attracting uh, people to it because that's what the resistances want them to do. So
Right.
any kind of a fake program has a much higher chance of succeeding in attracting people than a real approach.
A real life changing one. And it's funny, I was reading something recently about, and someone made the comment about, and it reminds me of that, these types of programs where people are like spend their whole life working on self-help, right? Their whole everything, they go from one program to the next, right? Always seeking. But what you're just saying, in these types of programs that aren't really real, they're not really the real thing that's going on, right? But they feel good to go to because it makes you feel like you're doing something, but it's not actually addressing the thing that you hope to address.
They actually give you momentary highs. You
Yeah.
know, we've had these programs, learn how to love over a 2-weekend retreat. People
Right.
flock to them and love them and feel inspired for 2 weeks plus 2 more weeks. And then the bottom drops out and
Yeah.
nothing has changed.
Yeah.
You
And it's
know,
back to where it was before. Yeah.
right. And so overcome the resistance to making change, overcome the resist. Your attachment to your resistances is a
Yeah.
dangerous. Your
Yeah.
attachment to your own resistances. So
So
it's
let's
like
talk about that
people
a little
being
bit. Yeah.
attached to their chains and
Yeah.
gilding them in gold and putting flowers between the links. They decorate their chains by which their freedom is constantly curtailed.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I
Not
can.
nice, is it?
No, and it's so, I'm laughing because it's like the ridiculousness of what we do to ourselves when
Yeah.
we feel like we have no other choice, but we always have a choice. And I see that in conversations I've had and friends that I talk to, what you're talking about, decorating the chains and like really, making it. And I'm like, but in my mind, I'm watching, and I'm trying to offer, reasonable suggestions for somebody who maybe isn't totally open, but watching, it's painful to watch somebody. And then I think about, but I do the same thing to myself. So how can, I'm not trying to judge somebody else, but it's easier to see in someone else than ourselves. But we also have that going on within, and being able to recognize that understanding that attachment, and that all of these kinds of feelings are normal, right? Because I know when I first started digging into this stuff and valuing myself enough to do this, I felt like there was something wrong when let's say I tried to do a 180 from the resistance, right? I tried to
Yeah.
go the opposite, and the feelings were so intense and they were so bad. And I remember for the longest time feeling like I was doing something wrong. But what I learned later is that's part of the process and that's okay. Right. So if anybody's
Right.
experiencing that, I want to make sure they understand that you're going to go through a range of emotions and that's just fine. That means you're doing it right.
In fact, the more you address the resistances, the more will they want to enact themselves against, they're resisting against you doing something about it. That's part of their nature.
Right.
So, and then you're in a society or in a humanity where that is the norm. So we call it normal, but it's inherently, it's not normal to us. It's opposite to us,
Yeah.
opposing to us, but it seems normal because everyone else seems to be doing the same thing.
And
But,
also this gets carried on from generation to generation. So we see it
oh,
in our
yes.
parents, we see it in our grandparents, right? So we see it everywhere we look. And so that's why it feels normal. But what we're talking about here is how to break these patterns to stop this kind of stuff so that it isn't normal anymore. And then we don't have to carry these on down the line for the future generations.
So what we're talking about right now, I'm sure there's quite a number of listeners who say, yes, I understand this. This is what's happening. I understand this. And then than go on actually suffering because they haven't done anything about it.
Right.
So it's important to, that's why you raise the topic of resistances, and that's so important. It's resistances to that. And so when you start to learn to understand the nature of the resistances, as well as the nature of the being that you are, then you can make an informed choice not to give your life to the resistances anymore,
Yeah.
but give
Yeah.
it to what innately, because there, you can learn to trust there are energies inside all of us that attempt to inspire the positive in us and lead us into the positive, fulfilling way of life. And we
Right.
even have signals within us that tell us, like our senses, our intuition, our feelings,
Mhm.
our emotions, when we're going against ourselves, they always give us signals of hurt. You
Right.
know, if even our senses, if you put your hand on top of a red hot stove, the hurt will have you pull the hand away. The
Right.
resistances will say, "Oh, doesn't that smell good? This charcoal sounds like a barbecue is going on. Oh, isn't this nice?" Well, now it's too late. It's
Right. Right.
that's how we suffer. So we learn about that there is an inherent goodness, inherent strength, inherent intelligence, positivity in us, and we learn to trust in that and resort to that. But if we never resort to it, we will never trust in it either.
Right. And it's like you said about having to experience it. I mean, that is that's that's what you do with what you learn, right? I think what you were talking about with other programs too, a lot seem to push people towards like there's only one way to implement it, or there's only one way to, you know, whatever it is for somebody that they might be learning. But what I found is that, like you've mentioned so many times, and I've even said this on the show when we've been talking, I experience it in my body. I understand what that means. They're not just words out there. I actually experience it. And when the listeners can do that, when you have an experience of usually resisting something, let's say, and using your example of, okay, today I want to try something different. Instead of resisting that, I'm going to do a 180. I'm going to go forward and try doing the thing that I want to do or that I didn't want to do. I'm going to try it in a different way. I'm going to bring a good attitude, whatever that might be. When you start to, when you can talk about it all you want, and you can theorize it and you can talk with your friends, but until you actually do it, then you start to see, one, it's not so bad. It's not, I didn't die from it, right? I had a different experience. Maybe it was a little uncomfortable at first, but now I can understand what that feels like. So when I do it again, I know what that means, and I don't try to run from it or get away from it. I
Yeah,
understand that that's part of the process I'm going through. So the experience part is so big in any sort of change, anything you want to do within yourself, being able to experience that and understand, because I might feel it in my stomach, but somebody else might feel it in their shoulders or their head or whatever, and they're all
yeah.
right. It doesn't matter. There's no way it has to be felt. It's
But
understanding what it is for you.
Sloan, I put it to you that you get the evidence much more strongly than you speak about as, well, okay, that feels all right, and so on. No, the evidence often is great release and relief
Yeah.
and, uh, a stimulation of energy and of empowerment and of joy, you know, and and that doesn't have to take, yeah, it deserves, if you had to spend years getting there, it would be worth it. But you can have it, you can feel that with the proper guidance, you can experience that very quickly, very soon. And I'm not saying total, but beginning of it, enough to let you know, I can make this work. I
Right.
can make myself be empowered. I can make myself be paying attention to myself, how good that feels. In
Right.
one day, I can feel how good it feels to pay attention to myself, to
Right.
be with myself, and so on. And then if I have experiences, guided experiences by which I can go deeper and fuller and clearer and easier. It's very, very encouraging. And that is the easy way of overcoming the resistances instead of making a life struggle out of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the identity of the person, right? You don't always have to be the person who resists everything, right? We have control and we have the ability to change. And
Right.
so let's go back to what we've talked about today. I want to recap a couple of things. So our topic today was resistance. And we've talked again several weeks or months in a row now on different topics. And I think the question then comes back, we'll put to the listeners is, so with this information, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to take from this? And what are you going to do? So maybe it might be helpful if we could sum up a few things from our conversation today that somebody could take away from this and actually start implementing today in their own life.
Yeah. Okay. One simple thing is if you want to find information of something that's not as obvious as, this tree is green, um, something more subtle and complex as we all are inside, right?
Right.
Well, do you go to somebody who knows or not? Like, okay, if you wanted to become a brain surgeon, would you think just that inspiration is enough? I'm going to start operating on brains.
No.
Or would you do better and go to a plumber? Or would you go to a well-reputed brain surgeon who is willing to teach you from the fundamentals on how to make it happen successfully?
Right. Right.
Right? So then how do you find somebody like that? Because as I said earlier, we can be fooled by somebody who appeals to your resistances and
Right.
seduces you that way. I think the best indicator lies within you, which
Right.
is when you hear someone talk about these things and this person speaks about things where you can say, yes, I know that to be true. I feel that right now. I can experience that right now. Then you have somebody whom you can trust in as your
Right.
guide. And
Right.
I've often referred to with our programs, I've said in the beginning of our talks, don't believe anything that I say. I say
Right.
that to my students always. Don't believe anything that I say. You need to know. Belief is lazy. You can be misled with misbelief,
Hmm.
with belief. But you need to know. How do you know? Experiencing it. Therefore, open yourself to the experience in the moment. As we're talking right now, you can experience what we're talking about, and that through that say, yeah, that is true. What she is saying is true. What he is saying is true.
Hmm.
Then you know that you can find true guidance, not false guidance.
Right. Right. And that indicator is within. And
And then you have said a key word before. Then you need to take action. We can
yeah.
talk all we want. It's not in the words, it's in the action.
Yeah.
And that's what I always tell my students too. Like,
Yeah.
I do a lot of talking, but there's a lot of action behind that and in that, which is to have you join in the experience of it. And then
Right.
you act by placing yourself on the path of relationship with yourself, knowing
Right.
yourself, being attentive, and learning how to accept yourself unconditionally. Accept yourself unconditionally, not second guess yourself all the time, not mistrust yourself as you've been conditioned to.
Right.
Accept yourself. Well, that doesn't happen by just superficial saying, yeah, now I accept myself. No, you need to get into that, and you can be helped and guided to the experiences of complete self-acceptance. Then you're
Yes.
aware of yourself, accepting yourself because you know the being that you are, and that results in love. Self-acceptance is the fundamental of love.
Right.
Without acceptance, there's no love. Accepting the being for the being that they are.
Right. And I love that call for the listeners to take action, right? There's the theorizing, there's the understanding the concepts, there's the yes, I agree with what the person's saying. And then it's up to the listener to then what's next for you. And that's something
Right.
I'd like to challenge everyone listening today is what is next for you? What is your action after listening to this? And we've had several conversations about this, and I hope everyone is loving these as much as we are having them. And I think the challenge is to ask the listeners, what's your action? What are you going to do now that you have this information?
Right, right. Um, we may have listeners who have much of the time internally said, yes, 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 I understand this.
Right.
Yes, I agree with this. Yes, yes, yes. And if you let it go at that, you got nothing.
Right.
You just got a lot of yeses and a lot of no's by disregarding following up. Because
Right.
unless you give it to yourself, to live it yourself, you don't have it. You
Right.
have nothing. Yeah.
Right. And
So,
this is a
it
beautiful
occurred to me, how many people have written to you, emailed you, called you or so and said, how can I get more information as to what to do? Right?
none. Right.
Well,
None.
that would be an action, right?
Right. Right. It's simple reach out. And I know you've got some programs coming up uh, in the next this summer. And then I know you've got a lot of this information on your website that's available that people can look at.
That's right. Yeah.
And so
So
I'll link to all
people,
that in the show notes. Yeah. So everybody can get that easily.
right. Good, good. Yeah. So do take action.
Right.
It and it doesn't matter whether you take action with us, either by contacting Sloane or contacting me, our center, uh, whoever. But just make sure that it is a viable source, not one
Right.
that'll feed your resistances, which is the popular thing. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, so that's really the call today to everybody listening is to take action and maybe even writing in and letting us know, what is your action? What are you going to do? What are you going to do today that's different than moving past the yes, I feel what they're saying. I get that. And I agree. What's your action after that? So we'd love to hear from you. You can email me, you can email Erhard. I'll put all of our information in the show notes, and we'd love to hear from you. I think it would be
And
great.
you know that your resistances are opposed to you taking this action.
Right. Your resistances are going to tell you no, that you shouldn't do it. But what we're talking
Right.
about is the opposite. We want to hear from you, and taking this step like this to email us and tell us what you're doing. That's that first experience of knowing, right? That's how you get to feel,
Yeah,
because after you send the email, you're going to feel different than how you
yeah,
felt before. You're going to feel
yeah.
accomplished. You're going to feel like I took the first step. And that's what we want you to feel too. We want you to experience that. So
Right.
please do reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
One thing I often say is, whose life is this anyway? Is it
Right.
yours or your resistances? Because
Yeah.
they are opposed to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And you
do
can
your
choose.
resistances oppose you, or do you choose to oppose your resistances and give yourself what you really would flourish with? You know?
Right. Right. And there's so much life to be lived on the other side of the resistances if you're willing to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, we're coming up on our time. As usual, our conversations go really fast.
We're just getting started.
I know it's always, I know. Do you have any closing thoughts for the listeners today, Erhard? I know we kind of wrapped up and we did some calls to action, but is there anything else you want to leave the listeners with today?
Yeah, be with yourself.
Yeah.
Like value yourself, to look into what we're talking about. Because whether it's, what I said or Sloane said or whatever, when you know, there's something in you that knows. And
Right.
when you learn to listen to that and respect that and follow up on it, then you're growing, you're evolving. And you know what happens in nature to organisms that don't grow? Everybody
They
knows
die.
the answer to
Mhm.
that. They die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not, okay, the moment I follow my resistance, I'm going to drop dead. No, that the death is slow and daily in tiny little increments.
Death by all those little cuts every day that you don't even
Yeah,
notice. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Erhard.
and love yourself. Learn
Yeah.
to love yourself, you know?
Yeah.
Then,
I mean,
then you'll take care of yourself. And this is taking care of yourself.
yeah. And that is, I can speak from experience on that. Having gone through what I've been through personally, that it's worth it as well. It's worth doing this for yourself, and it's worth getting to that other side to experience life in a whole new way. So,
Yeah.
Erhard, I want to thank you again for joining us. As always, an amazing conversation on the topic of resistance today.
Huh. Well, let us continue and see what we can come up with.
That's
Right?
right. Exactly.
Human beings, we are a limitless resource of
Yes.
entertainment.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
entertaining to ourselves.
My guest this week has been Dr. Erhard Vogel, author of A Dialogue with Death, The Teacher of Life, an ancient story for the modern world. And you've been listening to the Create What You Speak podcast, brought to you by webtalkradio.net. You can also hear the podcast on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and your favorite podcasting platform. I'm Sloane Freemont, and I hope you'll join me for the next episode of the Create What You Speak podcast, where we will continue to free our minds, expand our consciousness, and untangle those thoughts and patterns that keep us from living the life we desire. Check out my website, sloanefremont.com, to learn more.